Let's go a little slower on the cutting of emissions now,
which will be better for the economy or for our
which will be better for the economy or for our profits,
profits, because we can always make massive negative emissions
because we can always make massive negative emissions
reductions later when innovation makes those technologies make massive negative emissions reductions later
Later, when innovation makes those technologies
cheaper and better.
cheaper and better.
The dirty little secret in that argument
The dirty little secret in that agreement
is that it may come too late, and it may well give permission
is that it may come too late, and it may well give permission
for polluters to get away with polluting much more than need
for polluters to get away with polluting much more than need
be, rather than innovating ways to reduce emissions now.
There's also the question of who takes responsibility
Yes, so there's the question of who takes the responsibility
for each molecule of greenhouse
for each molecule of greenhouse gas.
One of the most
difficult
challenges is that lots of countries and companies
and individuals
don't want to own up to
to their carbon footprint.
their carbon footprint. For example, carbon-intensive
carbon-intensive countries like
India, China, other emerging markets
India, China, or other emerging markets
that are producing enormous amounts of emissions today.
that are producing enormous amounts of emissions today.
They point out that the goods they produce,
They point out that the goods they produce, for example,
may be consumed by Americans or
may be consumed by Americans or Europeans.
Europeans. So they should do the negative emissions.
So they should do the negative emissions, as they may say.
Or they may say, rich countries got rich putting carbon dioxide
Rich countries got rich putting carbon dioxide into the air.
Now it's our turn to lift our people out of poverty.
Now it's our turn to lift our people out of poverty.
So you pay for the negative emissions.
So you pay for the negative emissions.
As yet, there is no universal policy for accounting.
As yet, there's no universal policy for accounting for
and attributing
emissions.
Today, governmental net zero
pledge
pledges cover over two-thirds of the global economy. America and the EU are working towards
to a target
of net zero by 2050. And President Xi of China, the world's largest
the world's largest emitter,
has pledged to achieve carbon neutrality
before 2060.
before 2060.
Some people see ambitious climate targets and say, fantastic, the problem's getting solved.
The problem is solved.
Here's the problem. A target is no guarantee that we're going to get to the goal. It's important to have targets. It binds society together. It gives you a direction in which policies
is going to
go. It gives investors and markets some idea.
It gives investors and markets some idea and some degree
of certainty as to what
investments to make.
However, we often fall short of targets also, we should remember.
We should remember.
Most government policies focus
on cutting emissions
rather than how to tackle negative emissions.
Embracing, enacting, and scaling a negative emissions
Embracing, enacting, and scaling a negative emissions
plan to get to net zero is a
to get to net zero is a Herculean task.
Herculean task. This is something far bigger than, say,
This is something far bigger than, say,
the moonshot or other initiatives that it's often
the moonshot or the other initiatives that is often compared
to, because this involves really every economy on
because this involves really every economy on earth,
every government, ultimately
every government, ultimately every citizen.
All of us have to be involved and change the way we live.
All of us have to be involved and change the way we live.
And it's not just a technological revolution.
And it's not just a technical revolution.
We need a revolution in our mind.
We need a revolution in our mindsets.
I'm Vijay Vaidiswaran, the Economist Global Energy and Climate Innovation Editor.